from what we heard earlier from Anne and some of the discussions that David brought up. The work that I'm going to present today was done by one of my PhD students, Patricia Gonzalez, which I should acknowledge her right here and then. Just, you know, I'm going to switch to the urban areas, and many of you constantly hear one of the ways for us to become much more resilient and have more reliable and flexible water supply solutions is diversifying our water supply portfolios. And that sounds great till it needs to get done. And then it becomes the matter of what are the physical abilities of different utilities to do this, what's the socioeconomic challenges or opportunities, and what are the institutional layout that can enable this transition. And one thing I'm going to present today here is going to be about how we can use a model similar to the cap and trade model to leverage interconnectedness of different communities while we are focusing our common pool of resource such as water to diversify. This is very, very similar to what you constantly hear about carbon emissions and cap and trade, or enhancing our renewable energy portfolio standards by implementing different solutions. And we are just trying to apply that in the water sector. Just to show you how this works in the water sector, let's assume you have two communities, city A, city B, community A, community B, and they both depend on a common source of water, let's say groundwater basin. Let's say we ask them to both diversify the water supplies in order to reduce the reliance on this water, common source of water. Let's say that 25% diversification goal translates to 3 drops of water that you see here in this figure to the right and to the left. And that's basically to 25%. Let's say city A has a lot of capacity to do things. They have a lot of leakage that they can fix. They can do more gray water systems. They can build multi-benefit stormwater capture system. They can do more recycling. All in all, they can come up above the 25% goal that has been set for the community, for that region. However, city B might have a more limited capacity. They might actually only be able to do some recycling, more conservation, or actually do just green infrastructure. So they might come short in that 25% diversification goal. The idea here is if they both depend on a common pool of water, that extra water that's developed by community A can be put in that common resource, for example, the groundwater basin or river basin, as a credit, and then the community can receive subsidy or resources in order to subsidize some of the investments they have made in their infrastructure basin. And very similar to that, community B can go and buy some more credits in order to complement the amount of for not meeting the 25% goal. We tested this, piloted this program in this model for in the Sonoma County Water Agency. We collaborated with them. There are 9 different water utilities there, about 600,000 residents, and they're 60% dependent on the Russian River. Interestingly enough, this project was done before this drought. We did it in between 2017 and 19. So this might have some implications for what they're experiencing now. And let's say if we put a regional target for Sonoma County Water Agency to diversify 25%. Looking at 8 of the utilities in that region, you can see, so what you see here is the 8 of those water utilities. The red line that you see in each figure, it basically shows that 25% diversification goal and how each individual utility might need to achieve them. And the colors that you see are showing different projects that these utilities have in their books. They have evaluated different projects, considered them, might have done some initial studies or feasibility studies. And what you see here, which is quite interesting, is while, for example, utility A has a lot of different projects that they have evaluated, utility F basically only wants to rely on conservation to basically achieve their long-term water supply goals, which is not reaching that 25%. These are actually real utilities. I'm just not showing their names. It's just showing you the diversity of capacity and projects that are being considered. However, if we look at the region as a whole and put all these projects together, what you are seeing here is the region as a whole can achieve the 25% much faster and easier, and potentially with a much smaller marginal cost compared to each one of them doing the projects on their own. We tested the model that I presented earlier for them to identify which projects would rise up to the top of the list. And the reason for that is every utility has its own priorities. Some utilities want to achieve, want to do more conservation. They want to focus on recycling. Some want to focus on stormwater capture for various reasons. So we want to leverage these priorities. Just to show you one example, we are so limited in time, so I'm not going through a lot of different examples. Just to show you one example, if we allow these utilities to achieve this diversification goal as a region and give them the platform to do it, what you see is if you provide a regulatory setup and say everybody needs to achieve 25% diversification goal and not let them trade or collaborate across the board, what happens is after, let's say, similar to what we have with 100% renewable by 2030, let's say 25% diversification by 2040. This is what you see here. What you see is the region as a whole is not going to achieve that 25% diversification goal. And even though they invest in a lot of different projects, and the cost of that water that they have developed collectively is about $1,500 per square footage. And if you allow them to trade and collaborate across the board and work together, what you see is by 2040, they do end up achieving their diversification goal, and they achieve it for a much less, much lower cost. So the goal is, this is something that can definitely help them to achieve a diversified water supply while virtually trading resources, water and money. Just to wrap this up quickly, basically the virtual trading models provide a way to invest in local solutions by those who have the capacity to do so, and but they don't necessarily have financial means. A couple of things that are very important in these kind of models: we have to have regional caps and goals. Voluntarily trying to achieve things are not going to go anywhere. We have to have specific credits. We need to know whether basically we have to rely on flexibility to develop local solutions. And there needs to be very good monitoring and monitoring systems set up in order for people to be able to trust each other, and they would have transparency in this transition. And there also needs to be consequences for people who are not achieving their goals, or they have to financially contribute to this process. With that, I'm going to hand this off to Aaron. And I think later we are going to have a broader discussion about these topics. So Aaron, I'm going to stop and let you share.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hope can at least the panelists, can you guys see my screen? Great. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Aaron Fukuda. I'm the general manager of the Tulare Irrigation District in the Mid-Kaweah Groundwater Sustainability Agency. And I was asked to kind of present a kind of on the ground perspective of groundwater markets and what we're pursuing here in the Kaweah Sub Basin. And so I'm just going to quickly give you a high overview of what we're doing, and then hope that the questions I can help answer later on tease out some of the issues that we're confronting. And let me first preface this, that as a water resources manager, as we delved into our groundwater sustainability plans, I was a practitioner that did not support groundwater markets because of the stories or anecdotal issues that come up regarding monetizing water. I'm a convert in that I now realize some of the issues we're facing and the benefits that markets can help if they're properly designed. And that's why we're taking a very specific approach to designing our marketing strategy. Let me get started here. So just a quick overview. Again, I represent the Mid-Kaweah GSA. We are located in the Kaweah Sub Basin. This strategy being developed will be applied or considered by all GSAs in the sub-basin. There are 3 the greater, the mid, and the East Kaweah GSA representing about 441,000 acres in a critically overdrafted basin. We are kind of the epicenter of all things groundwater related issues, water quality, subsidence, and overdraft. Again, I do represent an irrigation district, a surface water user, and that's important because a lot of the credits that are accrued in a water market come from surface groundwater recharge. We heard Ann just talk about multi-benefit projects. We've talked with her about the potential we have. We're an old district formed in 1889. We serve about 70,000 acres. One of our blessings is 300 miles of earthen canal, which is its own recharge facility in itself. We also manage 1,300 acres of recharge basin, and through that system, our average annual surface water diversion is about 190,000 acre-feet. But really only about half of that goes to our crop demands. So the other half is a credit per se in the groundwater system. We've operated as a conjunctive use basin, and now we're taking that to the next level where our growers are actually building their own what we call mini banking operations for themselves. So who are our users in our subbasin, and why is this so important? Because these users are the ones that we want to use the market and be a part of it. So agriculture, of course, urban, industrial, disadvantaged communities, and the environment itself. So those beneficial users are being asked to come to the table to help design our market, and not just design it such in a way to protect yourself, but we're encouraging those beneficial users to participate within the market and help protect maybe their interest or benefit their interest. Our subbasin, as we were developing our GSPs, we became engrossed in putting the GSPs together. So the Tulare Irrigation District pursued as a Bureau Reclamation contractor a Water Smart grant in 2019, and we received that grant to pursue the Kaweah Sub Basin marketing strategy. So we estimated the cost of that to take about $830,000, and these are the tasks that are part of that grant application. I think the most important one that we're focusing on right now and spending all our time on is project outreach and partnership building and establishing the committee itself. And I'll explain a little bit more about that. Our original schedule was a 3-year program targeted to be finished in 2024, so that we had a water marketing strategy. I call it like an instruction manual, so that each GSA can consider it in their 2025 GSP updates to implement. However, we've changed that approach, and I'll explain a little bit. Again, we spent a lot of time establishing the committee that will direct this process. We felt this was very critical. So we wanted to select carefully the representatives that will be making the decision. So there is a broad spectrum of interests here. The 3 GSAs each have a representative on the committee, and their goal is to represent all beneficial users, because as a GSA, their job is to represent all users. And then we have ag seats, disadvantaged community, environmental. We have water specific managers that will be, because again, a water market in our subbasin is predicated on surface water. I know we're talking groundwater credits, but it generates by surface water. So we need those folks at the table. We even have an industrial member. Chuck Nichols represents a processing plant. And again, geographically, we selected people from their geographic representation. So we have the whole basin covered. So some of the early concepts, because we are just in the early stages right now, we were stalled a little bit. COVID kind of held us up a little bit, and we are working on our allocation systems right now. So you can't have a market without an allocation because there's nothing to market. So they're kind of waiting for us to get that. It's in the process hopper right now, and we anticipate that by the beginning of next year, we'll have the allocation. But some of the early discussions that are happening, and I call it the manager's corner because it's been all these ideas come into my corner here, is number one, we've accepted that we need to accelerate the development of our water marketing strategy. Mother Nature has not been cooperating in the last couple of years, and the drought has now accelerated our allocation system. So as growers are going to be asked to cut back, they need some tools in their toolbox to manage those cutbacks. And so we're accelerating the development of our water marketing strategy, and we hope to have what we call version 1.0 by the summer of next year. The market is for the Kaweah Sub Basin. We do not intend for this to be for outside investments in our water supply. So we know that there's other markets where folks can participate in the market remotely. I have friends that actually here locally participate in the Australian market. So that is not what we're developing. We're developing a very localized market for the Kaweah Sub Basin. We want the disadvantaged communities and the environmental community to be considered in our strategy, and we want them to be an active participant in the market, not build rules so that they are protected, but actually maybe accrue credits and participate. And then lastly, it's really localized, and there's pressures to move the water very far distances, but our hydrogeologists are warning us that that long distance transfer situation or permanent transfers create hydrologic conditions that are not going to be favorable for our GSP. So it's a very localized market. Like I tell our growers, stand at your well, and what you can see around you is where you can trade it. Anything beyond your visual sight is probably going to be too far. So, and I guess one thing I didn't put on here is one of the things we're learning right away is that groundwater markets will not solve all of our overdraft problems. They're just going to take the sting out of the hurt that we're anticipating. So we have other tools we're working on, but one of them we do acknowledge is that our subbasin will go through some land fallowing or seasonal fallowing, and that's how we're going to curb the most of our groundwater overdraft. So I think at this point, Ajami, I'll turn it back to you, or Peter. I'll stop.
Thank you, Aaron. Yes, Peter, can you share actually?
Okay, I'll get started. Good to see everyone. Happy New Year. Wonderful to spend the first day of the new water year with you. I'm Peter Drekmeier. I'm the policy director for the Tuolumne River Trust. And here you see a map of the Tuolumne. I think people are familiar with Hetch Hetchy Reservoir, and the SFPUC owns that, and they deliver water to 2.8 million people in the Bay Area. The other large reservoir, Don Pedro downstream, is actually 6 times as big as Hetch Hetchy. That's owned and operated by the Turlock and Modesto Irrigation Districts, and it's primarily the water is used to irrigate 200,000 acres of agricultural land. And San Francisco actually paid for almost half of that dam in exchange for a water bank, which allows them, when their reservoirs are full, but they still have entitlements, they can bank water there up to 570,000 acre-feet. So 1.5 times Hetch Hetchy. And then when it's dry, they can capture water at Hetch Hetchy that they otherwise wouldn't be entitled to. And on paper, they subtract an equal amount from Don Pedro, from their water bank. So the Raker Act in 1913 granted San Francisco the right to build Hetch Hetchy, O'Shaughnessy Dam there. And they acknowledged, the federal government acknowledged, that the irrigation districts had senior water rights. So the way the entitlements work is the first 2,400 CFS of runoff belongs to the irrigation districts. Anything above that belongs to the SFPUC. And there's actually a 2-month period, mid-April to mid-June, where that gets bumped up to 4,000. First 4,000 belong to the irrigation districts. So in dry years, like you see 2012 to 2015, the SFPUC has very poor water rights. But in an average year like 2016, or big water years like 2011 or 2017, they have exceptional water rights. Because in an average year, the SFPUC is entitled to 3 times as much water as they need. And that helps replenish water after a dry spell. So at the height of the recent drought, prior drought in 2015, the SFPUC had enough water in storage to last 3 years. By summer of 2016, enough to last 5 years. And then 2017 was the really wet year. So they have a lot of storage. They have 3 reservoirs of their own. They have the water bank and then Bay Area reservoirs. So total storage for the SFPUC is almost 1.5 million acre-feet. And so this allows them to get through long dry periods without running out of water. For example, right now, the SFPUC has enough water in storage to last more than 4 years. But there's a very conservative approach to water based on something called the design drought, which couples, for planning purposes, the 87 to 92 drought with the 76-77 drought to create an 8.5-year drought, and planning for demand to be 25% higher than it is today, assuming that all of their customers are going to meet the full contractual need, and assuming that no new water is going to be brought into the system, like recycled water, for the next 25 years for planning purposes. So the design drought really influences the way the SFPUC manages the Tuolumne River. And what the problem is when the reservoirs aren't all full, the water agencies will capture everything they can. They'll only release the base flows, which are pretty low. And you see between 2012 and 2016, the unimpaired flow was just 12%. And then 2017, everything filled up and they had to release 79% of the unimpaired flow. So the river was flowing at 9,000 CFS from early January into the summer. And you can see that pattern has repeated during dry stretches, and then you get a wet year or two and everything fills up. So in an average year, only 21% of the Tuolumne reaches the San Joaquin River. And the Tuolumne has the worst salmon run in the Central Valley. Historically, there were well over 100,000 salmon spawning in the river. Last year, there were just 1,000. We do paddle with the salmon trips in early November, the first 2 weekends. Hopefully we'll see some. If you're interested in joining us, you can find out about that on our website. And it's not just about salmon, it's really the salmon-based ecosystem. The salmon bring all these nutrients from the ocean to these upland habitats. They fuel the food web, they fertilize the soils. And our good friend Felicia, who we heard from earlier today, did a wonderful job as president of the State Water Board. And the board acknowledged that we have to address the Bay Delta ecosystem. It's in crisis, and launched into updating the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan. And phase 1 focused on the San Joaquin Basin. And in December of 2018, the water board adopted higher flows of 40% unimpaired flow between February and June. So currently for the Tuolumne, it's 21%. If implemented, it would become 40%. But the irrigation districts sued the State Water Board, and San Francisco sued as well, based on the design drought and fear that they could run out of water. And by the way, this was all before Newsha was on the SFPUC. She's done a fabulous job, a real breath of fresh air, and we're feeling much more optimistic. We've got some great commissioners there, so we're hoping to be able to collaborate more moving forward. But on the Tuolumne, it's very similar to what's going on statewide. Of the developed water, 80% is used for agriculture, 20% for urban, mostly the Bay Area. And just to the north in San Joaquin County, there's a great example of more efficient delivery of water. The South San Joaquin Irrigation District, they launched into a pilot project to pressurize water so you could do sprinklers and drip irrigation. And that reduced water and energy use by 30% while increasing crop yield by 30%. So there could be some opportunities, to answer Tom Francis's question earlier, for urban areas to help invest in some of these technologies and share in the savings. There's very little money available in the irrigation districts themselves because they charge so little for water. The Modesto Irrigation District charges just $23 an acre-foot. And you can see a lot of that is fixed charge. And then you're looking at, $2 an acre-foot for the first 2 feet, and then going up to 5, and maybe you get into the $11.25. And even if you include the multiplier effect, so the production of crops, the processing, the transportation, it's the value of the water used in agriculture is about $500 to $1,000 per acre-foot in economic recovery. So obviously we're not using hetchy water to grow a lot of crops because we're paying $2,000 an acre-foot. So there's a huge difference between what we pay and what the farmers pay. And actually there was a lawsuit where the energy customers in the Modesto area sued, saying that they were being forced to subsidize farmers because the cost of the delivery was really 5 times what they were charging the farmers, and they won that lawsuit. So we might see some changes with the rate structures. But something happened in 2012 that taught us a lot. And San Francisco wanted to purchase water from the Modesto Irrigation District, starting at 2 million gallons per day, but maybe eventually doing 22 million gallons per day. And this was based on the design drought. They felt like they needed this much water. So it would have been take or pay. They would have paid $700 an acre foot, whether they used the water or not. So it would have been $1.5 million per year for water that they didn't even come close to needing. I mean, remember at the height of the recent drought, they still had 3 years worth of water in storage. And then anytime the system fills and they have to spill, they lose all of that water. So it was a really bad investment. But the farmers rose up and said, you shall not sell water out of our district. And it was a big deal. And they got the MID to cancel that whole plan. And we saw a lot of changes on the MID board and personnel there. But what was really interesting is the irrigation districts rarely show their hand. The narrative is that if we have to give more water to the environment, our economy is going to tank. But in this case, they had to show the farmers that, look, this is a great deal for us because we have all these infrastructure projects that can save water, but we can't afford them. We can get San Francisco to pay for these projects and pay for our relicensing of Don Pedro Dam, and you'll be fine, and we'll be much further ahead. So things like capturing spill from canals that currently is just flowing back down into the San Joaquin River. So they came up with these figures that there was a potential to save 25,000 to 40,000 acre feet at a cost of 115 million. So amortized over 20 years, it's about $200 an acre foot. A lot cheaper than developing recycled water, perhaps $3,000 an acre foot. And MID is about half the size of TID. So we can assume that they have some opportunities for infrastructure investment as well. And as I mentioned, in 2017, San Francisco needed, it's blocked right now, I think it's about 370,000 acre feet to fill the system. Their entitlement that year was 3.1 million. So they had to dump 88% of their entitlement, just flowed down the river. Great for the river, but we had one really, really good year at the expense of 5 terrible years. And in years like this, if you have a way to capture that water and store it somewhere, it's going to be available during droughts. And so partnering with the irrigation districts to do an active recharge program and creating a situation similar to the water bank, but a groundwater bank where they get credits. They can capture water at Hetch Hetchy that otherwise wouldn't be entitled to, and they subtract an equal amount from the groundwater water bank would make a lot of sense. So we're starting to get some traction with the SFPUC. We really appreciate Newsha's leadership there. And there's a lot of opportunities. Maybe there are similar opportunities for partnerships between other urban water agencies and irrigation districts. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Peter. I really appreciated how these different talks sort of fit into each other, but we have 2 questions. One is Tom asking me a question about BOSCA and SFPUC helping BOSCA to do diversification. I think, first of all, I'm not wearing my SFPUC hat, so whatever I say, it's using my Stanford hat, partly because SFPUC is a body of 5 people, not 1, and a lot of these things is a collective action. We all have to talk to each other and work together. I think, look, the study that I showed was originally supposed to happen in BOSCA, and we had a great collaboration with BOSCA water agencies to make that happen. The reason we did it for Sonoma was it was a smaller community, so it was and they had agriculture as well, so it would allow us to do to sort of pilot the project, pilot the trading platform. The same thing can happen in BOSCA. However, the idea here is to be able to identify what projects are there, how much would they cost, and then start from the bottom and build up. And the collaboration part of this is key to success, making sure that we are actually collectively investing in solutions that can help us as a community. And I think if we can do that, then I think everybody should be happy to participate as part of this and achieve those goals, including trying to be better stewards of our water and using less, especially during the dry periods. And then I think the next question is for Peter. And Peter, I think, again, Tom would like to know, what do you think, since the result of the curtailment is likely to remove the ability of SFPUC to access water stored in Don Pedro Reservoir, do you think there needs to be a reconsideration of these curtailment orders? I'm wondering if you have any comments.
Yeah, so the curtailment orders don't affect water and storage, but because of the water bank, there's this question, would the SFPUC have to let any runoff coming into Hetch Hetchy pass through, and then they might still own it, but in the water bank where they can't access it? And my feeling is that the State Water Board needs to become very clear that what they care about is water in the lower Tuolumne that feeds into the whole Delta system for environmental reasons or for other uses. And that it doesn't matter if that water comes from the water bank on paper or if it comes from Hetch Hetchy. And so it's an unknown right now if they're going to try to enforce a system that doesn't really make sense. It hurts the SFPUC in Bosca, but doesn't help the rest of the state. So it's something I'm looking into. I've talked to some folks at the Water Board, and I hope we can clarify that.
Sure. We also have a question from Eric Rosenblum. Great question, Eric. I really appreciate this. This is about the connection between urban areas and farmlands and how they're very much intertwined. And we in urban areas need farm products, and farmers need customers in the urban areas. So it's not like urban versus farmers or farmers against urbans, but actually all of us are in this system together. So the question is, what can we all do to help spread the word that cities and farms are all part of the same interdependent water environmental system, so we can work together and implement solutions? But one comment, I would like to give Aaron a chance to talk, actually. But one comment I want to make here is, actually, Peter mentioned about the cost of water for the farmers and cost of water in the urban areas. And many of you know I'm very sensitive with those numbers. We have to always remember, farmers don't need treatment. They don't need a team sitting and dealing with a lot of different things. The amount of services and infrastructure we need to bring water to the urban areas is much more immense compared to what farmers need. That's why there's a difference between price of water for urban areas versus price of water for farmland. With that, Aaron, I want to give you a chance to comment on the question that Eric brought up.
Yeah, it's just really quickly on the price of the water too. That's an interesting one, and there's always an argument over why is ag only paying double-digit dollars and why is urban have to pay so much more. You also have to remember is that the state of California users enjoy a very affordable food product source, and number two is our farmers would love to control the price of their own product, but they cannot. And in many cases, it's regulatorily set what their prices are. So, and the profit margins, while their farmers have to make money too, they support the folks and the farms. And I would say if we wanted to charge what we wanted, our farm labor would be making more money, right? But the water costs have to be reasonable. So yeah, that discrepancy is always going to be there, I believe. And as far as how do we bridge this new world, I've explained to people that when we developed the two large state projects, the CVP and the State Water Project, the environment was always left out, and that's created that schism. And I think that there are folks in the water realms, and Ann and I are part of something called the Collaborative Action Plan, which is a group of folks trying to solve the Central Valley's problems, define the problem, and find a solution statement. And I'm really encouraged because for once, the parties, the disadvantaged community NGOs, the environmental community NGOs, and water are coming together to say, if we developed the future without looking at all the components, we're going to fail and repeat history again. So how do we as individuals go out there? I think we promote that if we're going to find a solution, that solution has to include everybody, and the water needs that the environment and the disadvantaged communities and farming need equally. And let's support each other and not be try and beat each other out of water supply. We're going to have to figure out a way how we get it to everybody. It's really simple, but really difficult. And it's going to be a hard, but if the Central Valley wants to survive the next 20 years under Sigma, that's what we have to do.
Great point. I mean, the collaborative governance is going to be the word for this century if you ever want to survive. And I think the only people who right now are benefiting from all these problems you're having are the lawyers. And I'm sorry if there are lawyers on the call and they find this not nice, but the reality is we're just fighting over things, and the reality is in the long run, we have to rethink and reconsider the way we do things, and we all are in it together. Nobody is going to get out of this and survive this without working with others. And I think that goes back to another comment that we have here from Peter Yolis, that's asking, apparently Peter Glick, and some of you know him, wrote an op-ed today talking about how we have to revisit water right rules in order to incorporate climate change. I'm just wondering what you guys think. Peter, Aaron, and I'll be happy to add something at the end. Peter, do you want to comment on that?
We certainly do, and that's a big project. We could have a whole water palooza about that. One thing I'll mention though is that water is a public trust resource in California, and I am grateful that we have so much agriculture close by. And I remind myself it's impolite to criticize farmers with your mouth full. We really, that relationship is so important. But one challenge I have with it is a lot of produce, about a quarter of it is exported overseas. So certain farmers, sometimes it's agribusiness, they're privatizing the gains of a public trust resource, water, but socializing the costs on the environment and other things. And I think it would be really fair, just as a starting point, to charge an export fee, but use that money to support agriculture and becoming more efficient. So that's something that might be a starting point that would resonate with most people as a fair way to address that issue.
Great point. Aaron?
So on the water rights and the climate change, we did review the latest State Water Resource Control Board staff report on that. I'll have to differ. We hold water rights higher than my merit certificate. Let's just put it that way.
Hopefully not.
Well,
maybe hopefully your wife is not watching.
My wife, I'm addicted to my work. But we have to be very careful what we ask for. And when you open those water rights, you're going to unravel the state of California in one motion. Another way we need to start thinking about this is we need to understand climate change and adjust our operations to match climate change. And our irrigation district tries to be. We are not perfect, but we want to try and be an example of that. When the wet years come, you got to capture that. You got to adjust your system. But I do not think you need to open up the water rights in order to adjust for climate change. You need to adjust your operations to adjust for climate change. And Peter, that was we always get that comment regards, well, you get to export your food. And I always respond, well, you get to export your iPhone, right? No one's telling you you can't. And all the downstream environmental impacts of simply an iPhone or a Tesla car. But your idea of an export credit to help our own people would be well received. It really would, because we feel like are we really not supposed to? So think about it. So if I grow a package of lettuce in California, am I not supposed to ship it to somebody across and just leave them to be on their own? I mean, that's isolationism, and I don't think we want to live like that either. And we don't limit the boundaries of our other technological products like computers, phones, all those other things. But an export tax credit is something we use on a lot of things, and that would be fantastic. So.
Okay, unfortunately, we are out of time. I just want to say I really appreciate this conversation, and I think the tax on exports and imports and all that, I think all of this is highlighting that we need to have long-term vision on how we want to solve our problems and water problems, and sort of avoid what we're experiencing right now, which is sort of going as fast as we can to do as much, to gain as much as we can in the shortest time we can, and not think about next generation. So let's hope our sustainability goals are going to be achieved under some of these rules and regulations. With that, Dennis, I'm going to pass this on to you. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you, Newsha and Aaron and Peter. Great discussion and presentation. And also thanks to Eric Rosenblum for really, and Tom Francis for his questions. But I did put Peter Glick's a link to that op-ed in the chat, and as well as Eric's question, because I think that really crystallizes you know, kind of a lot of things. It's like, you know, we and I mentioned in it an independent, interrelated solution, because no one group is going to get their way. So we are now at a point where in the breakout time, I'm going to, the recording lady's going to say something.